Mount Everest, the ultimate test of human endurance, a place where dreams are either made or buried beneath the ice forever. In May 2012, a determined woman set out to achieve the impossible. Shriya Shah-Klorfine, a Canadian climber with no high-altitude experience, had one goal: to stand on top of the world. She had spent years chasing this dream, pouring every last dollar into making it a reality. But Everest is unforgiving. It does not care about ambition. It does not care about dreams. After a grueling 22-hour climb, she stood at the summit, victorious. But the real danger wasn't getting to the top. It was getting back down. Exhausted, low on oxygen, and fighting against time, Shriya's descent turned into a desperate struggle for survival. And just hours after reaching her goal, she collapsed, never to rise again. Despite being warned multiple times that she was too inexperienced, moving too slowly, and that she was dangerously low on oxygen, that she should turn back, she refused. She had come too far. She had sacrificed too much, and nothing was going to stop her from reaching the top. This is the tragic tale of Shriya Shah-Klorfine. Shriya Shah-Klorfine was born on January 11, 1979, in Kathmandu, Nepal. Her early life was marked by significant personal tragedies that shaped her resilient character. At the tender age of 10, she experienced her first major loss when her father passed away unexpectedly, causing a dramatic shift in her family circumstances. Following this devastating event, Shriya relocated to Mumbai, India, along with her mother and siblings, seeking stability and new opportunities in the wake of their loss. Shriya and her siblings were enrolled at the prestigious Cathedral and John Connon School, one of Mumbai's most esteemed private educational institutions, providing them with quality education despite their challenging circumstances. Shriya's teenage years in Mumbai were marked by additional heartbreaking tragedies that would have broken the spirit of many. She endured the painful loss of her older brother, who died in a car crash, and shortly thereafter, her mother also passed away suddenly. Following these personal tragedies, Shriya briefly returned to Kathmandu, Nepal, where she pursued higher education at Tribhuvan University. At the age of 21, seeking new horizons and opportunities, Shriya secured employment as an assistant purser on a cruise ship, which marked the beginning of her professional journey and introduced her to a more global perspective. This position likely contributed to her adventurous spirit and international outlook that would later inform her mountaineering ambitions. While working on the ship, she met her to-be husband Bruce Klorfine and married him in 2002. Eventually, Shriya moved to Canada to join her husband. Her transition to Canada represented a significant turning point in her life as she embraced her adopted country with remarkable enthusiasm and civic engagement. She became actively involved in various social and political groups, demonstrating her commitment to Canadian society and values. Her political engagements reflected her commitment to her adopted country. However, it was her ambition to climb Mount Everest that would define her most. Climbing Everest represented a profound, long-held dream for Shriya. This ambition appears to have developed over time and became increasingly central to her identity and personal goals. For Shriya, reaching the summit of the world's highest mountain represented the ultimate achievement in personal accomplishment and determination. Shriya's desire to climb Mount Everest was deeply intertwined with her patriotic feelings for Canada, her adopted country. According to available information, she articulated this connection explicitly, stating, "This is my dream and passion, and I want to do something for my country." Her website specifically noted that she aimed to become the first South Asian woman from Canada to make the attempt to raise the Canadian flag at the top of the world's highest peak. Additionally, she aspired to become Canada's fourth Canadian woman to make the climb, further emphasizing the historical context of her ambition within Canadian mountaineering history. Despite her high ambitions, she lacked mountaineering experience. Everest was reportedly the first major mountain she ever attempted, an extremely perilous choice for a novice. She tried to compensate with physical training. Over 2 years, she ran or hiked 19 kilometers a day with a 20-kilogram pack, took karate classes, and practiced indoor rock climbing to build strength. This training improved her fitness, but it did not give her the technical climbing experience that veteran mountaineers recommend for tackling Everest. Typically, climbers gain experience on smaller peaks, such as Denali or Aconcagua, and take mountaineering courses before attempting an 8,848-meter giant. Shah-Klorfine skipped those stepping stones. She hired a Nepal-based outfitter called Utmost Adventure Trekking, a budget guiding company that had never before led a client to the Everest summit. Nepal's authorities did not require proof of experience at the time, so she easily obtained a permit. According to later reports, even the expedition organizers had misgivings about her lack of climbing skills and had warned her against the climb, but her mind was set. In retrospect, the combination of her limited experience and a less established guide service was a recipe for trouble, one that would become evident during her summit attempt. Shriya found the trek to Everest Base Camp exceptionally difficult. The demanding 2-week journey covered approximately 124 miles through harsh Himalayan landscapes, steep paths, deep valleys, and unstable bridges. This trek served as a rigorous test of endurance and acclimatization to the reduced oxygen levels she would encounter higher up. Still, it was merely an introduction to the more significant dangers awaiting her. Upon reaching base camp, Shriya quickly realized the gravity of her situation. The area bustled with climbers from around the globe, each driven by the ambition to stand atop Everest. However, the initial excitement soon faded, replaced by palpable anxiety. Climbers were acutely aware of the immense risks ahead, especially as the weather that year proved particularly harsh and unpredictable, leaving even seasoned mountaineers uneasy. During her training sessions at base camp, Shriya's lack of experience became painfully evident. Her determination was unwavering, but she consistently fell behind, struggling with fundamental skills required for climbing. Guides grew increasingly worried about her ability to handle crucial tasks, such as properly attaching crampons or navigating the dangerously shaky ladders placed over vast crevasses. Strangely, while others battled altitude sickness and severe symptoms caused by low oxygen levels, Shriya showed little discomfort, though this minor advantage paled compared to her glaring deficiencies in basic mountaineering. As weeks passed, the conditions at base camp deteriorated further. Climbers remained stranded, anxiously waiting for a narrow window of clear weather to attempt their ascent. The number of climbers steadily grew, creating dangerous congestion, with many inexperienced individuals like Shriya drawn in by their financial means rather than their skill. However, Shriya refused to reconsider her decision. Her guides, genuinely fearing for her safety, explicitly warned her, "If you continue, you will die and endanger our lives as well." Yet Shriya dismissed their warnings, driven by an obsessive determination. Despite the clear risks, she stubbornly persisted, unwilling to abandon her dream, even in the face of escalating danger. On May 18th, Shah-Klorfine made her summit bid via the standard southeast ridge, known as the South Col route. She departed Camp 4, the final camp at around 8,000 meters, very late in the evening, among the last climbers to start the summit push. As a result, she was at the back of a long line of climbers, moving slowly in the thin air of the death zone. Ultimately, it took her nearly 17 hours of climbing to reach the summit, far longer than most climbers. She did not stand on top of Everest until approximately 2 p.m. on May 19th, significantly beyond the typical safe turnaround time of midday, which is used to ensure descent during daylight. Overcrowding and delays played a major role in her slow ascent. Dozens of climbers were ascending that day, causing bottlenecks along the route. Around the south summit, just below the true summit at roughly 8,750 meters, Shah-Klorfine encountered Ganesh Thakuri, the leader of her expedition, who was already descending. Thakuri immediately recognized the danger posed by the lateness of her ascent. He and other Sherpas urged Shah-Klorfine to abandon her climb and turn back, warning her about dwindling oxygen supplies and diminishing energy levels. However, Shah-Klorfine was resolute in her determination to finish what she had started. Reports indicate that she refused their pleas, firmly telling her Sherpa guides, "No, I have to go. I have to go." Her singular focus was on reaching the summit at all costs. In the end, Shah-Klorfine achieved her dream. She reached Everest's summit and proudly unfurled the flag she carried, enjoying a triumphant moment in mid-afternoon. But by that point, she was critically short on both time and resources needed to safely descend. The descent turned into a desperate struggle. Shortly after starting down from the summit, Shah-Klorfine's strength was completely drained. She had been climbing for well over 20 hours without rest, and the effects of extreme altitude took a severe toll. She became sluggish, could barely remain upright, and displayed symptoms of severe altitude sickness, including slurred speech and obvious disorientation. By that point, she had exhausted her supply of supplemental oxygen. Her team reported she had gone through about 9 bottles in total. To make matters worse, the weather began deteriorating as temperatures plunged and powerful cold winds sapped her remaining energy. Shah-Klorfine soon fell far behind the other descending climbers. Her 2 Sherpa companions made heroic efforts to save her. They physically supported and guided her, at times even pushing or pulling her along the ridge, desperately trying to reach the relative safety of Camp 4. However, as darkness fell, Shah-Klorfine became virtually immobile. After collapsing from exhaustion around an area known as the balcony, at approximately 8,300 meters, just a few hundred meters above Camp 4, she could no longer move under her own power. The Sherpas themselves were now running dangerously low on oxygen and began suffering from frostbite and hypothermia. They attempted repeatedly to revive Shah-Klorfine and motivate her to continue, even using her final words, "Save me," to rally one last effort. But by that time, Shah-Klorfine was barely conscious. Ultimately, with no other options left, and fearing for their own survival, the Sherpas had no choice but to leave her behind and descend to Camp 4 in search of help. Once it became clear she could not be moved. Tragically, Shriya Shah-Klorfine died on the upper slopes of Everest on May 19, 2012, only hours after fulfilling her lifelong dream, succumbing to a lethal combination of exhaustion, altitude sickness, and exposure to Everest's brutal conditions. Shah-Klorfine's death, following her successful summit, sent shockwaves through both her home community and the mountaineering world. She was one of 4 climbers who perished on Everest that tragic day in May 2012, amid overcrowded routes and rapidly deteriorating weather conditions. News of her death made international headlines and ignited widespread discussions about the growing risks associated with inexperienced climbers attempting Everest. Back in Toronto, Shah-Klorfine's friends and family were heartbroken. A close friend shared with CBC News the devastating impact of hearing Shriya's final words, "Save me," saying it had crushed her heart. Her family immediately began exploring ways to bring Shriya's remains back home. Recovering her body from such extreme altitude proved an immense challenge. For roughly 10 days, her body remained near where she collapsed on the mountain. Other climbers making subsequent summit attempts encountered Shah-Klorfine's remains still attached to fixed ropes along the route. Eventually, a specialized recovery team of Sherpas successfully retrieved her body, painstakingly lowering her from above 8,000 meters down to Camp 2, situated around 6,400 meters. On May 28th, a helicopter was able to safely transport her remains off Everest to Kathmandu, Nepal, where she was received by her family. Back in Canada, a memorial service was held in Toronto on July 8, 2012. Friends, family, and community members gathered to celebrate and honor Shah-Klorfine's determination, courage, and adventurous spirit. Within the global mountaineering community, Shah-Klorfine's story quickly became a cautionary tale. Experienced climbers argued her death clearly illustrated the dangers inherent in attempting Everest without sufficient experience, preparation, or robust support systems. The tragedy intensified ongoing debates about whether Nepal should impose stricter requirements to regulate who is allowed to climb Everest. Issues such as commercial guide companies accepting inadequately prepared clients and the increasingly common traffic jams on Everest's narrow summit ridge received intense scrutiny. In Shah-Klorfine's specific case, critics highlighted questions about her guide company's experience level and critical decisions made during her climb, particularly regarding whether enough supplemental oxygen was carried and why guides had not intervened more firmly and earlier. In response, the guide company defended itself by pointing out that Shah-Klorfine had ignored repeated instructions to turn back, as well as prior warnings against attempting the climb due to her limited experience. Ultimately, Shriya Shah-Klorfine's tragic end, alongside other fatalities during the deadly 2012 season, underscored a critical and growing issue on Everest: overcrowded routes and inexperienced climbers, driven by ambition but lacking essential preparation, create potentially lethal circumstances on the world's highest peak. Shah-Klorfine's death also prompted reflection and action among Nepali authorities. In the years following the 2012 tragedy, Nepal discussed and eventually introduced new regulations designed to limit access to Everest by climbers who were insufficiently prepared. Officials announced plans requiring anyone applying for an Everest permit to have first successfully summited another high-altitude peak of at least 6,000 or 7,000 meters, an attempt to screen out absolute novices. Additional proposed measures included restricting permits for elderly or disabled climbers who might face increased physical risk at high altitudes. Although enforcement of these new policies has sometimes been inconsistent and even legally challenged, the consideration of such regulations highlights how tragedies like Shah-Klorfine's have significantly impacted policy debates on climbing safety. In Canada, Shah-Klorfine's family and friends remembered her as courageous, determined, and passionate, someone who boldly pursued an extraordinary dream. While her Everest bid ended tragically, it also brought greater public awareness to the harsh realities and inherent dangers of high-altitude mountaineering. Shah-Klorfine's story has since been widely shared in articles, documentaries, and discussions, serving as a powerful reminder of Everest's lethal challenges.